Hello and welcome. In this video, I want to show you how quick and easy it is to set up and launch a WordPress blog in the cloud using RightScale. After watching this video, you should be able to understand the process of launching a WordPress blog in the RightScale Dashboard, see the WordPress blog live in the cloud, and duplicate the steps shown here. So when you are done and you go through this video and set up a WordPress blog for yourself, you should be able to wow and dazzle your friends, your mom, your girlfriend, or even that curious onlooker in an airport or conference. In other words, you should be able to bring RightScale everywhere. Before we begin, and if you are ready, I would suggest you log into your own account in the dashboard at my.rightscale.com and be prepared to follow the steps presented in this video. Of course, you can do this later if you'd rather just watch the video and maybe take some notes. First, let's address a few notes before we begin. There will be some technical concepts introduced in this video. For our objectives, you do not need to know these concepts in depth, nor do we want to focus on these concepts. That being said, when a concept does come up, I will provide you with a basic understanding of what it means. Secondly, the purpose of this video is to set up and launch a WordPress blog to demonstrate the power and elegance of launching an application in the cloud with RightScale. It is not intended to demonstrate blog functionality per se, so this video ends when you have launched your blog and can navigate to a URL and see it up and running in the cloud. So, as we get started, here is a quick look at the steps that you will perform to launch a WordPress blog. Import the server template, add an SSH key, configure a security group, create a deployment, edit inputs, and launch the server. To begin, first log into your account at my.rightscale.com. While the purpose of this video is not to provide a dashboard overview, I will highlight a few elements that you will use. The Design tab is where you will find server templates. Clouds is where you will add an SSH key and a security group. And Manage is where you will create a deployment, edit inputs, and launch the server. In the left pane, you will find System Status, Events, Bookmarks, and Monitoring. First, let's take a look at importing the server template. So, what is a server template? A server template describes how an instance in the cloud, that is, a virtual computer, will be launched, what operating system it uses, and what software it will run. Server templates allow you to pre-configure servers by starting from a base image and adding scripts that run during the boot, operational, and shutdown phases of a server instance. To help you get up and running faster, RightScale regularly publishes server templates for commonly used applications that are already configured with the appropriate write scripts. You can also import or subscribe to server templates that have been published by ISV partners or others in the RightScale community. You might also ask, what is importing? Importing a server template is the process of taking a template from the RightScale multi-cloud marketplace and making it available so that you can use it in your account. First, we'll import the bitnami.org WordPress server template. To do this, navigate to Design, Multi-Cloud Marketplace, Server Templates. We now can view all of the available server templates in the RightScale Multi-Cloud Marketplace. To look for the WordPress server template that we will use, go to the search box, type in bitnami.org WordPress, and then press Go. Next, we click on the title of the server template, and then click on the Import button. The server template is now imported into your account. Now let's take a look at adding an SSH key. While the steps to create an SSH key and a security group are very simple for the purposes of this demo, if you are not familiar with SSH keys or security groups, it might be a little unclear. So let's take a quick look at an SSH key. An SSH key is basically an authentication credential. In our example, it allows a remote computer to access the server running the blog application for things like looking at the operating system, checking some system logs, or making changes that are not performed in the dashboard. You should note that in the next steps I will create an SSH key and then a security group. These objects are individually created for a specific cloud, and since we are using AWS in this video, they are also created in a specific EC2 region. So think of each EC2 region as its own cloud. EC2 equals Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud. That is, the public cloud offering from Amazon Web Services. Now we'll create an SSH key by going to Clouds, AWS US East, EC2 SSH Keys, and clicking on New. I will name the SSH key WordPress Demo and press Create. That's it for our SSH key. Let's create our security group next. Next, we will configure a security group. A security group defines who can access your application once it's up and running in the cloud. A security group is essentially a firewall that can be configured to provide as little or as much access as you want to clients accessing your application. By default, when you create a security group for an application, there are no permissions to access the application. You can think of that as a firewall that no one can get through until you add access. So, for our WordPress blog, if we just created a security group and didn't configure that security group, no one would be able to even view the blog. So let's create a security group. To create the security group, I will go to Clouds, AWS US East, EC2 Security Groups, and click on New. Next, I will name our security group. The group description can be anything, and then I will press Create to create the security group. Next, we are going to configure the security group. Now, for many applications running in the cloud, configuring security groups can take some planning. And it can get a little technical, which you maybe can see when you look at the fields in the permissions area of the screen. But for our blog, it's a few quick edits and we are done. As I mentioned before, when a security group is first created, there is no access to the application, whether by IP, the address someone's computer is coming in from, or by service, web browsing to it, for example. Since the goal of our demo is to have a WordPress blog running in the cloud, let's configure our security group so that anyone can see our blog. Think of anyone as meaning they could be anywhere in the world from any internet address or IP in the world. And since our WordPress blog is a web application and something that people will browse to using Firefox, Safari, or another web browser, we want to make sure that we grant access for web browsers to see the blog. To do this, we are going to change one line in the permissions field and press Add. First, we add 80 and 80 ports, which means allow user access port 80 or someone from a web browser to access the blog. Then we want to allow any internet address in the world to access the blog. To do that, we make one change to the IPs field, replacing 32 with 0. Now the IPs field reads 0.0.0.0, and in internet addressing, that means any internet address anywhere. Next, press Add. Now you have configured the security group, and the permissions are anyone from any computer in the world can access the blog with a web browser. Next, we will create a deployment. Our next step is to create a deployment and then add our WordPress blog server to it. A deployment consists of a cluster or group of servers that work together and share common input variables and cloud configurations. In a deployment, you can manage a group of servers in the same way that you would manage a single server. You can define common input variables, execute write scripts on some or all servers, as well as create multiple server environments for production, development, staging, and maybe even failover scenarios. So, ultimately, a deployment is a container for a server or group of servers that work together. So, to create a deployment, I navigate to Manage, Deployments, and press New. Now I give our deployment a nickname, and since this demo is in EC2, I assign it to an availability zone. For our blog application, any availability zone will be fine. Availability zones in EC2 are used to create architectures which can provide redundancy and higher performance. Now that I have a deployment, I will add a server to it. If you don't have a sense of what I mean by a server, just think of it as a computer on the internet, or think of it as a website. It's a location for people to view your demo blog. Next, I click Add Server and select Bitnami and bitnami.org WordPress. We'll call the server WordPress Demo and choose the SSH key and the security group that we created earlier. Next, we will click on the Launch Server icon to start the server. Next, we will edit the inputs for the server. Before the server will run, we need to provide some information that is required to initially launch the WordPress blog. In RightScale, these are called inputs. Inputs can be as basic as account information, like a login and password, or more complicated, like an operating system parameter. So for our inputs, I will enter user for login, my email address, my name, and a password. Finally, we will launch the server. Now we'll go ahead and save the inputs and launch the server by clicking Save and Launch. Save and Launch is used when you enter or change inputs. Launch is used when you already have inputs defined or don't need to change them. This server will now start to boot up, and you can observe its progress by looking at the Events pane or the CPU and State columns. It will be operational in approximately 5 minutes after you launch it. This 5 minutes includes the time it takes to contact EC2 for the initial allocation of resources, as well as booting up the instance according to the server template you use. You can select a number of fields. I am going to toggle some fields off and add public DNS. Now that our server is operational, we can browse to it by clicking on the public DNS. Now our blog appears in our web browser. And we are done. You have a publicly accessible WordPress blog up and running in the cloud. The blog is now fully functional, ready for you to add content. You should note that to have your blog accessible with a domain like www.mycoolwordpressblogdemo.com, you would add elastic IPs and configure DNS with a DNS provider like DNS Made Easy. Thank you for watching this demo. We hope you have learned a lot and will enjoy sharing your WordPress blog running on RightScale with your friends and coworkers.